Good morning and welcome to our live event. What is abuse? Or is it abuse? Or is it just a normal behavior, someone having a bad day? How do we make this judgment between what is actually abusive behavior and what is just something that we could work through? Or perhaps, someone's having a bad day and we should make allowances for that. This is a question I actually hear more than you would think. I know a lot of people decide that it's going to be really obvious when you're being abused. Well, the really tricky thing about especially emotional abuse is it's not really obvious, and there is a spectrum of people that just have anger issues, people that have a bad day, that have other things going on, mental illness, lots of reasons why they might actually have difficulty being in a good place with you all the time. And when do you actually call it abuse, and when do you need to think of it as abuse so that you can respond in a appropriate manner. So my name is Ailsa Kepi, and I'm curator of the group Women Healing from Emotional Abuse with Power, Passion, and Pleasure. You can also find out more about my programs, coaching, and work on my website, pleasureforhealth.com. So let's dive into today's topic. And thank you so much for those of you that are watching live. That's always great to see some folks here. So where is this subtle line between mistreatment, let's say, having a bad day, and where we start saying this is abusive behavior? So we're going to look at this from a couple of angles. We're going to look at it from what kind of behavior we look for in the other person, so the abuser perhaps, and see what we would notice about that we might determine was abusive. And then we're actually going to also look at ourselves. So what might be abusive for some people might not for other people. I would say that that's a possibility. And so some of the way that we're going to actually determine whether something is abusive or not is to look at how we are responding, like what is happening to us in this relationship. And if we are ending up with abused woman syndrome or abused person qualities, then whatever relationship we're in is probably being abusive towards us, and we need to respond appropriately. Just because we decide we're being abused or someone is abusing us, it doesn't mean we're passing judgment forever and ever on that person. I don't think we need to hold that type of guilt. We're looking at what is something I need to do for me. If I am being abused, then I need to deal with how that's affecting me. And if this person that you're involved with or you're friends with goes off and ends up in a happy relationship with someone else, well, more power to them, right? But if you're in an abusive relationship, it's a relationship. It's a partnership that isn't working for you. So I think that's where we have to start from. We're not trying to pass judgment and lay down the law on this person is an evil person and will always be that. They may be, but that's, we don't have to start trying to figure that out. We just need to figure out if we are in an abusive relationship. So when we start asking the question, what is abuse? That's where I start from. So some things we need to watch out for. We talk about these red flag type of ideas. So here's some things that you might want to watch for. Things like if he retaliates against you for speaking up about something about his behavior that you don't like. So if he texts you every day for a week and then he doesn't text you for a week and you feel, you're not sure, you get anxious, you don't know what's going on. And then he texts you again and he's like, well, why are you being so dramatic? This is no problem. I'll text you when I have time and I'm working and X, Y, and Z. And if he kind of retaliates and says you're the one with the problem, just because you brought up the fact that, well, you texted me every day for a week and now you're not texting me for a whole week and you never gave any explanation. That's difficult for me. Most people that are able to be in a reasonable relationship could hear that and say, okay, that's fair. If I text you for a week and then I don't text you, that's, I can see how that could be confusing for you. So why don't we come to an agreement? Let's look at what's realistic. Here's why, or maybe I go away to work every other week or whatever that is. So most reasonable people will see and hear what you're complaining about. Now, it doesn't always mean you're going to get what you want. Like, if somebody was texting you 24/7 and then they stop, maybe they just decided it was too much work. So these are the kinds of conversations, though, that if you asked about that, somebody reasonable would say, okay, I hear what you're saying, let's work that out. But somebody who's kind of retaliating to you, like saying, you shouldn't pry into my business. I thought you trusted me. Why are you being so dramatic? Like, nobody else complained about this before. Like, if they start retaliating or getting angry with you because you brought up something legit that you were having trouble with, then, this is something that you want to start tagging as possible abuse. Because he doesn't believe that you have the right to defy him or, kind of stand up for yourself or say what you need in the relationship. And if he doesn't believe that you are allowed to have your own beliefs or to stand up for yourself in this way, that's not going to lead anywhere good in the relationship. You're not going to end up with this caring, loving person in your life. You're going to end up with someone who, is discrediting you, doesn't believe you have the right to defy him, and so you're just going to be a doormat. And I speak not in a shaming kind of way from the actual knowledge of doing that for years and years and years, and the person doesn't change. If they, at the core of themselves, don't believe you have the right to say what you need in a relationship, and for them to actually hear that, if they don't believe that as a core thing, they're never going to change. They're just going to discredit you. It's your problem. So that's one thing I would watch for in your relationships. And, another thing, that kind of goes along with that is if you say, well, I really don't like when you yell at me or whatever. And he's like, oh, I don't yell. And you're like, well, it comes across as yelling. And he's like, okay, well, I'm sorry. And it's, and I use the term he, it could be a she, it could be a they. It's not necessarily gender-based, although it typically is. So anyway, don't get hooked on my pronoun use. But if the person, says, I've apologized, and, what else do you want from me? I apologize. You don't accept my apology. Now you're just being this and that. Well, if they apologize like that, then of course you're not going to accept their apology, because they're the way that they're speaking, their body language isn't coming across as an apology. It doesn't sound like they're sorry. And so, that's one of those signs of an abusive person, is that they kind of force you to accept their apology. And that's not okay. If you're in an actual relationship, an apology is something you offer when you actually feel that the other person has taken some responsibility or has felt remorse for what they did and is actually looking to change. So that's, if they start just coming back at you, they say, well, I apologized and now you're just being a bitch because we need to watch. That's definitely abusive. So actually, this is a quote that's quite funny. I think that some therapists that work with these types of people say that when this person gets up in the morning and looks in the mirror and they see they have a dirty face, they start washing the mirror. They don't wash their own face, they wash the mirror. So that's what we need to look at. If somebody is continually, doing things that aren't great, and you're bringing it up and you're trying to have like conversations that normal people have in relationships, and you find that they're always pointing it back at something wrong with you, then that's what's happening. They're not looking at their own dirt. They're looking, it's everything out there that's the problem. So, I thought that was a great quote, actually. Another thing that you could look for is it's never the right time to bring up something, that you want to talk about. So in a normal relationship, it's true that when your partner or whatever walks through the door after a long day at work and you launch into some rant about, the garbage not being taken out, whatever, it may not be the exact right time. And you're, after a long day at work, if it's been a tough day, you may get some pushback, like, hey, just give me a break for a bit. Like, we can talk about this later. But an abuser, well, you can never find the right time to talk about things. So, you might, give them a nice dinner. It's like a good day. You're sitting on the deck with a glass of wine. It's all good. And you bring up something that, hey, I wanted to talk to you about this. And immediately it's like, you just always want to ruin the best day. Now I'm all, having a good time. Now you've made me all in a bad mood again, or whatever it is. That's abusive. To never be able to bring up something that you want to bring up in the relationship. If you're always choking down your feelings and trying to make everything nice for the other person, then that's abusive. And the reason a lot of us get stuck in these patterns of attracting abusive people and being there is maybe that's all you've ever experienced in relationships, that pushing your own self down. When I talk to some of you on the breakthrough calls, which you're very welcome to book, by the way, anybody can book a free call with me and discuss your next step. But when I have a chance to talk to people one-on-one, that is what most commonly comes up, is that from early childhood even, or in your teenage years with your first boyfriend or girlfriend, or, working through, you have always had to push down your own feelings. Perhaps it comes from having an alcoholic parent, absent parents, things like that, where you couldn't actually come forward and say what you needed. It could be something, circumstantial, like you had a sibling that was, had issues, medical issues, or learning developments, or something like that, and you didn't have any space in your family to have needs or wants. If you've learned that relating to people means you don't get to have what you need and want, then of course we tend to follow those same patterns in our later relationships, and abusers will take advantage of that. They see you a mile away and they know that you're not going to stand up to them and you're not going to ask. And if they say, it's never the right time, like, how can I deal with, you're sitting at home all day and I have to go out to work, how can I deal with this kind of stress? You're going to have to figure it out. If it's never the right time to talk about something and then it's always back on you, then that's an abusive relationship. And if you want to discover something different, you are going to have to do some work to get to the place where your needs and wants, and you are having some strength to stand up. And that is exactly where, I help women I help step in and do a program with them to get them to that place. It takes some work. It takes some allies. It takes, someone mentoring and coaching you probably, as well as perhaps therapy. So these are things that, there's no shame on you if you aren't there by yourself. These are things that take practice. They take support. They take having somebody on your side. So if you feel like, as you listen to this talk, that, oh my gosh, I'm in an abusive relationship, but I just don't know if I can get out of it, reach out. This is exactly the place where you can do that. Another thing that they might always do is, you made me do it. You made me shout at you because you're, such a slow, person. I was so hungry by the time you had dinner ready. You made me hangry, that's not necessarily the truth. You don't make anybody have any type of feeling. They have their own feelings. So if somebody tries to put that on you, then that's a red flag as well. Of course, physical assault, really of any kind, however minor, is definitely a red flag. If somebody pushes you, punches a wall, throws something, all of these things that are physical, that are there for intimidation, that is, a huge red flag for abuse. Even if it only happens once, it likely will happen again. And because often with the male-female dynamic anyway, as women, we tend to be smaller and weaker than men. Not always, but usually. And the intimidation of having physical violence in the home is extremely detrimental to any type of relationship, aside from any kids involved. If children are seeing that type of behavior and learning that that's okay in a relationship, I dread to think what we're teaching the next generation. So really think about that. If any physical violence happens in the relationship, that is time to call 911, to get out, to reach out for help, to get support group, to start making your plan to leave, because it's likely not going to get better. And if both of you are committed to working on yourselves and the relationship, you could do that in separate places and then perhaps get back together when that work has been done. But that is means both people doing their work, not just you. Because often an abuser will say, oh yeah, I'm going to get help. I know I have anger issues. Well, if you know you have anger issues, you want to be getting help. You want to be doing therapy. You want to be going to an anger management class. You want to be putting that into practice in your job, in your relationships with your friends. And you want to see some concrete results before you believe that anyone's done that. So, physical assault of any kind, forced sex of any kind, any type of sexual coercion or things like that. I talk about this. I've had a few clients that have, of course, it's very common to have actual sexual abuse and emotional abuse in the same relationship. So, very common. So don't feel, it can be a really difficult thing to talk about because we get so stuck in the fact that this is something we don't talk about. If sex wasn't something you talked about as a kid, it may be very difficult to share what's going on in your relationship. I'm trained as a sex educator. This is exactly the kind of thing I deal with. And so, bringing it up and actually talking about, he forced me to do this, he took away that, he called me this, like these kinds of things are shame inducing and they keep us in the closet. So if sexual abuse is part of your relationship, that is definitely there too. So the kinds of things that I said we would look at about ourselves. So if we are being abused, we have to look at ourselves and say, am I an abused woman in this case, or an abused person? Am I actually displaying those types of qualities that show that I'm being abused? Even if I don't know if I trust myself to see all the red flags. If you are demonstrating these qualities, then you're being abused on some level in your relationships. If you're afraid of the person, this is not the starting of a great relationship. So if you are afraid of your partner or a friend or a father or whoever is your abuser, then that's, you being afraid of someone is a red flag. If you are finding that you're getting distant from your friends and family because, your partner or whatever makes those relationships difficult, oh, I don't want to go see your family. They always want us to stay so long, or this and that. They don't like me, da 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 da. So if he or she, your abuser, is taking you away from your other relationships of friends and family, that's something to notice. If your energy or motivation is declining, or if you're starting to feel depressed, this is a sign of abuse. So if you're noticing that, reach out, talk to somebody, get some help, get some coaching, because empowered and, joyful and passionate people, it comes from within. It's not just they're born under the right star. It comes from doing our work, and it comes from having support and not being abused. So if you're finding those types of things, you want to definitely add that to your list of red flags. If you find that your opinion of yourself is going down, and you're always like trying to be good enough and you just can't ever get there, and then you start feeling worse and worse about yourself, that's a red flag. If you're always preoccupied with that relationship and how to fix it, what kind of things he wants to eat for dinner, how can I make the weekend go well, how can I kind of smooth everything over? If you're always thinking about and obsessing about the relationship, that's a sign of abuse. If you feel like you can't do anything right, or you're just not good enough, and the person's telling you that, if you feel like all the problems in your relationship are your fault, this is the sign of abuse. Now, it may not just be this relationship. Like I said, you could have a pattern of abusive relationships going back to when you were a kid. And every time it's like your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, until you actually have this core belief that it's your fault. And if you have that belief, an abuser will be like, great, I don't need to do that work. You're going to take on all the responsibility for this relationship, and I don't have to do a darn thing. And they will continue to abuse you. And that is one big sign of being in an abusive relationship. So if you notice that you are always taking on the fault, one of the first steps we need to get you to, and please do book a call with me if you notice these things, one of the first things we need to get you to is noticing what the abuse is. We need to get you to realize this is abuse. And once you've accepted that, then we can move forward. So do you repeatedly leave arguments feeling like you've been messed with, but you can't figure out exactly why? It just seems like you kind of can't get your head around it. I can speak to that personally in that, whenever there was an argument, especially about what had happened in the past, I always felt like I just like, because my ex-husband would turn everything around, like say how his reality said something happened, which was always different than mine, and always discredited my feelings. And so he would say, no, 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 that's not how it happened, this and this and this. And I would always kind of like take it back because I wasn't clear and trusting in my own instinct at that point in my life. And I couldn't stand up, and I would just go away feeling like, what just happened? Like, I don't even know. So, gaslighting. So, these are some of the signs that you are involved with an abusive person and that you really need to look at. So, it's not only the behavior of the other person, it's how it's making you feel. And it may not just be this relationship, it may be many relationships piled on top of each other that give you this overall effect. So let's say you have been in loads of abusive relationships in your life, and maybe you've never experienced a good relationship. So how are you even gonna know? Well, maybe this is just the way it is. I really challenge you to reach out and let's, talk about what actually a really healthy and positive relationship could look like for you, because this is what's possible. If you've never had it before, how do you know? You're right. So let's map out the journey one step at a time to get you there so that you could have a different experience in your life, and you're not just going to continually replay the abuse over and over and over again. You are worth more than that. So please reach out, book a call with me, www.ailsakepi.com/apply gets you directly to the link to book a call with me. It's no charge for you. For those of you who are ready to do this work, for those of you who say, yeah, you know what, I am in an abusive relationship and I want to have a different experience and I need someone to help me find the steps towards that, then please do reach out. Thank you so much for watching, Angie, Heather, Melissa, Evelyn. It's been lovely having some of you here live. I look forward to interacting and hearing from you in the group. And for those of you watching on YouTube, do reach out at www.pleasureforhealth.com. All right, have a great day.